Since the dawn of language, humans have been trying to explain the unexplainable. The deep ways in which we are all connected to something greater than ourselves. Philosophies grew out of the realities of culture, climate, landscape, or even wildlife. The sun, the wind, a bird, or a land animal could be a god, the source of life itself. To know it was to have knowledge. Yesterday we said goodbye to Art Stein, a great student and teacher of peacemaking, sustainability, spirituality, and faith in the human project. So today feels like a good day for a little lesson in spiritual theology in his honor. I want to start in the first couple centuries after the death of Jesus of Nazareth. It was by no stretch the beginning of human spirituality, but it rose from one of the greatest teachers of all time, combining philosophies from Christianity, Judaism, and Greek paganism, and even something akin to the Buddhist teachings of Jesus. I'm talking about gnosis. Gnosis is Greek for knowledge. At the core of Gnosticism was the belief that we can all be freed from the pain and suffering of the physical world by accessing a secret, special knowledge of the spiritual world. The philosophy was all about understanding humanity in relationship to the divine in a way that transcends the physical world. Early Christian leaders considered Gnosticism a heresy, so it never really caught on. But maybe it didn't catch on because it became more extreme with time, eschewing and even condemning the body, especially its pleasures, equating the physicality of the world with evil. While Gnosticism may have died as a theological movement, elements of it have popped up throughout history in ways many still consider the spiritual sacred and the body profane. A millennium and a half later, in an era of spiritual revolution that often pitted the spirit against the mind and body here in North America, the Transcendentalists, led by Unitarians like Emerson, Thoreau, and Alcott, sought to articulate spirituality in a new way. Transcendentalists argued that each of us is part of a larger system, and that each of us has the power and the insight to change the world. They said that truth, as defined by religious creeds created by men to support their own power, needn't have any control over us at all. That humanity didn't need to count on other people's interpretation of God and what God wants. Knowledge, the Transcendentalist said, knowledge of the truth, real truth, about the order and morality of the universe, lives within each one of us. Emerson called it the oversoul. He said that each of us can be a portal to the divine because the divine lives within each of us. We are the divine. Over time, because the language of the Transcendentalists was so focused on the wisdom and understanding that lives within each of us, within each individual, those words have often been taken out of context, reinterpreted. Here's what I mean. Henry David Thoreau went to live simply on Walden Pond, not to get away from people, but rather to engage more fully with the world, with people, with the pond and the life around it, human and otherwise. He wanted more connection, more knowledge through relationship. And I'm constantly amazed by the number of people who believe that Thoreau's experiment was about individuality and self-sufficiency. His words have been proof-texted and readapted to romanticize and even justify hyper-individualism that defines libertarian extremism. He's a hero of some conservative doomsday preppers, which is exactly the opposite of what he wanted to do. 62 years after the death of Thoreau, mathematician Alfred North Whitehead retired from Oxford University and joined the faculty of Harvard, where he began to articulate process philosophy. I've spoken in the past about process, which is closely related to quantum physics. It's super complicated. It's a belief that everything is connected and that everything affects everything else throughout time for infinity. Every small occurrence in process, no matter how great or small, is what Whitehead called a concrescence, an inevitable becoming, something unchangeable, unavoidable, perfect in its imperfection. Honestly, process is so opaque and so jargon-filled, it's become impenetrable to the vast majority of people. But theologians like John Cobb have run with it and developed it into process theology, a way of understanding God not as an all-powerful superhumanoid, but to think of God as a verb. God is a verb. God is the act of evolving. God is the process of becoming. In process theology, humans are both enormously powerful as the big-brained beings that we are, but also hopelessly minuscule in the grand scheme of the eternal and ever-changing universe. In process theology, we are God, God is us, and we are all constantly changing together. Everything we do creates God, and everything God does creates us. Which brings me to Octavia Butler. She's considered to be the first Black woman science fiction writer. She's often labeled an Afrofuturist, and her award-winning novels explored the intersecting themes of racism, sexism, and power, while being both political and spiritual. The Parable of the Sower and The Parable of the Talents, published in succession in the 1990s, were set in a dystopian America in the near future, which feels like now. The main character, Lauren Olamina, becomes the leader of a burgeoning new religion called Earthseed. The scriptures of the faith are revealed to the reader through snippets, including this morning's reading. At the core of the scriptures is one central idea: God is change. In other words, God is a verb. So the first time I read the parable books, I felt certain that Ms. Butler must have been influenced by process theology. There's no evidence I could ever find to support my feeling. Yet, to me, I still feel like those two things are connected. After all, everything is connected, whether aware of it or not. And I'm not the only practical theologian to be influenced by Ms. Butler. Adrienne Marie Brown is a writer, activist, and facilitator. She was executive director of the Ruckus Society and director of the League of Young Voters. In her book, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, there's one thing she makes clear right from the very beginning. She is deeply influenced by the work of Octavia Butler. And Brown's work, in turn, has been profoundly influential with religious liberals across the world. Productivity expert and author Tiago Forte describes her work this way. It all begins with the idea of emergence, drawing from nature. Her examples include roaches, ants, deer, fungi, bacteria, viruses, bamboo, eucalyptus, squirrels, vultures, mice, mosquitoes, and dandelions. She studies how mycelium grow underground in thread-like formations, gaining strength by connecting their roots to one another. She admires how ants and starlings are able to coordinate in large numbers and react to their environment by following simple local rules. Ferns and their fractal patterns are the inspiration to look for small-scale solutions that propagate outward and impact the whole environment. Dandelions are admired for their extreme resilience, that they can thrive and spread despite being uprooted and trampled on. Ms. Brown asserts that humans have traditionally identified with the kings of the jungle, the predators at the top of the food chain. That's why so many of us tend to like a strong man, even when he's cruel. Because we want to be strong, self-sufficient, in control. But as Brown points out, these are many of the animals that are endangered or going extinct first as the climate changes. And perhaps instead of looking to them for models of how to adapt and change, we need to look to resilient, decentralized, interdependent life forms like mycelium and ferns and dandelions that adapt through collaboration while still maintaining the core practices that are essential to their own survival. Emergent strategy, as Brown defines it, isn't so much a checklist of how to get things done. It isn't an instruction manual for how to build a new movement. It's a mindset of learning from the past, living in the present, and loving a new world into being. Beginning with ourselves, rather than trying to fix everyone or everything else that is just a product of everything that has led up to it. And maybe that's what Gnosticism and Transcendentalism and process theology were all about, as they tried to describe the ineffable. The wisdom of the universe that lives within our own eternal spirits is what can tap into the past and live into the future, accepting things exactly as they are now. Spirits connected to everything. Maybe that's what we are, spirits connected to everything, whether we know it or not. What I find useful in Brown's work, what I find easy to convey, is the importance she places on being open to the universe, finding its power within ourselves and tapping into that, developing and maintaining spiritual practices where the deep truths of the universe, the unshakable realities, are alive within us. When these truths come to me, as sometimes they do, it reminds me of how so many past leaders have humbled themselves or have been forced into humility through prison sentences, exile, or other punitive measures to live simple lives, spending time in prayer and meditation and reflection. It all reminds me that they seem to have this solid core of truth within themselves that cannot be shaken by external pressures. It reminds me of Thoreau being imprisoned for refusing to pay his taxes in opposition to slavery. His connection to the oversoul deepened, and he was more connected to all life. When we're connected, really connected to the universe and open to the changes it presents to us, that's when we tap into our real power. The power of changing, growing, collaborating with the universe instead of fighting it. Adrienne Marie Brown writes, "Perhaps humans' core function is love. Love leads us to observe in a much deeper way than any other emotion. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have a massive impact on what was considered organizing. If the goal was to increase love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through eyes of love. We would see that there's no such thing as a blank canvas, an empty land, or a new idea. But everywhere, there's complex, ancient, fertile ground of potential." We would understand that the strength of our movement is in the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured by their depth. Scaling up would be going deeper, being more vulnerable, and more empathic. I don't know what made me suddenly want to reread Emergent Strategy, or what makes me feel like all these ideas are connected. Maybe it's all the same idea expressed differently, evolving in a linear fashion through time, the way I just outlined it. Or maybe they're all separate ideas with overlapping bits that are totally random. Maybe the connection is an ever-changing God or random chaos. I don't know. But this I do know. In every epoch, there have been human beings who used the language, metaphors, and the best scientific understandings of their times to explain and express a cosmic truth. All life, all existence is interconnected. And we all need each other and must depend on one another if any of us is to survive. And we humans, with our opposable thumbs and big brains capable of complex thought, with our incredible capacity for destruction and creation at massive scales, have a particular duty to be mindful caretakers of all life, all being. And it doesn't have to be a chore of self-sacrifice. The part of emergent strategy that is resonating for me these days is that the work of stewardship and change-making can be pleasurable, joyful, even when it's frustrating and scary. If there's one thing we took away from Art's memorial yesterday, it's that he was a peacemaker, a change maker, who lived in joyful harmony with himself and with the world. If we can be like Art and keep tapping into the power of our own creativity, compassion, and resilience, nurturing gratitude for the past and hope for the future, we can not only survive the chaos of our times, we can even help change the future. We can manifest ourselves as the fractal patterns of ferns, mycelium communicating through soil, or dandelions spreading healing through the wind. We can call it transcendence, we can call it process or emergence, whatever we call it, we can manifest it. Let's all rise now in body or in spirit to sing together hymn number 1.